You know, we all wanted that feeling that we're in the driver's seat of our own lives. But the thing is, we live in a world that is messy and unpredictable, and, well, a lot of the time, it's just chaotic. And that creates this huge tension inside all of us, this deep, almost primal need for control, versus the reality that, a lot of the time, we don't have any. So today, we're going to unpack the psychology of control, from its most extreme forms to the really surprising ways it shapes our everyday lives. And we're going to start at the most extreme edge you can possibly imagine, a place where control isn't just a feeling, it is literally the only thing standing between you and, well, oblivion. We are talking about base jumping. That's a quote from a base jumper named Dan Witchell. And it just perfectly captures that moment, right? That final check-in with reality before you step off a cliff into a world where every single movement, every split-second decision is a life-or-death act of control.
To really get the stakes here, you have to understand the physics of it. See, unlike skydiving from thousands of feet up in the air, base jumps happen from incredibly low altitudes. And that means jumpers have just seconds to get stable, pull their parachute, and find a safe place to land. There's practically zero room for error.
I mean, just think about that. In that tiny little window of time, they have to manage their speed, their trajectory, the perfect moment for deployment. It is the absolute ultimate exertion of control in an environment that gives you exactly 0-second chances. A perfect jump really is a masterpiece of precision.
And this really drives that point home. This is the number of documented fatalities on the base fatality list. This is not a sport where tragedy is some rare exception. Risk is just woven into the very fabric of it. It shows you just how razor thin that margin for error really is.
So what happens when it all goes wrong? Jumper Matthew Go did everything by the book, but a simple twist in his parachute changed everything in an instant. All that precision, all that control, it just vanished. He described the feeling as being completely powerless, just a passenger as his body hurtled into a cliffside. Now, miraculously, he actually survived, but his story is this terrifying reminder of how fast total control can flip into total chaos.
So that's the real question, isn't it? What happens to us psychologically when we experience that kind of powerlessness? Let's shift from that physical loss of control to a mental one and look at two drastically different ways we humans react when we feel completely and utterly trapped. Okay, so first up, there's something called learned helplessness. This idea comes from a famous series of experiments back in the 60s. Researchers found that dogs who were subjected to electric shocks that they couldn't escape would, later on, not even try to escape when they were given a clear path out. They had literally learned that their actions didn't matter. They became passive. They just gave up.
But here's the thing. A loss of control doesn't always lead to giving up. Sometimes it leads to the exact opposite. And the 3M model helps us understand why. It basically says that when people feel a loss of significance, a loss of control over their own lives, they can get drawn to a really powerful story, a narrative that promises to give it all back, usually through some kind of extreme action. And it's all supported by a network of people who are cheering them on.
And this contrast creates two totally different responses to the exact same feeling of being powerless. On one side, you've got the externalizer. They feel trapped, so they blame the world, society, other people, and sometimes they adopt these extreme narratives where violence becomes the only way to get back that feeling of significance. But on the other side, you have the internalizer. They feel that same powerlessness, but they turn it all inward. They blame themselves. They become passive, just believing that they're the problem and that nothing they do can possibly change their situation. It's the same feeling, but it leads down two wildly different paths.
But this isn't just about extreme cases. This feeling of a world that's just spinning out of control is something that an entire generation is dealing with right now. So let's bring this down to our everyday lives and see how it's actually shaping modern relationships.
Take a look at this data. A pretty significant chunk of young adults, especially men, are reporting no sexual activity at all. Now, this isn't about a lack of desire. Researchers think it's actually a symptom of a much deeper anxiety about the world itself.
I mean, think about it. If you're Gen Z, you've grown up in what feels like a constant state of crisis. Economic instability, global pandemics, climate anxiety. It all creates this baseline feeling of being really vulnerable. And in that kind of context, something like dating and intimacy can feel like, as one researcher put it, an additional risk. It's just one more unpredictable thing to manage in a world that already feels completely overwhelming.
You know, psychologists actually have a term for what can happen when a kid grows up in an unreliable environment. It's called parentification.
It's basically when a child learns, hey, I have to be the responsible one here, the one in control because nobody else is. They learn to push down their own needs just to manage the chaos that's all around them.
And that's the connection, right? This isn't just a single child's experience anymore, it's almost a generational one. Growing up in a world that feels chronically unstable can lead to becoming an adult who is constantly on high alert, who feels guilty for even asking for help, and who's always scanning the horizon for the next risk. It's a psychological adaptation to feeling like the world is fundamentally out of your control. So we've seen this desperate human need for total control, and the psychological chaos that happens when we lose it. But our final lesson, our final perspective on this whole thing, comes from a very, very unexpected teacher.
Let's talk about cats for a minute. If you have a cat that sleeps with you, you probably think it's because you're a warm, cozy bed. And yeah, you're not wrong about that, but you're kind of missing the bigger point. It was never really just about the warmth. Let's just look at the pure biology here. For any cat, sleep is the most vulnerable state they can possibly be in. Every single survival instinct they have, honed over thousands of years, is screaming at them to find a hidden, secure, protected spot to rest, somewhere a predator can't get to them. And yet, they choose you. They walk right past every quiet corner and hidden closet and climb in a bed with a giant who's like 15 times their size. That isn't a search for heat, it is a profound act of trust. They are consciously overriding their most powerful instincts. They're basically saying, in the only way they know how, with you, I can surrender control. With you, I feel safe.
And you can see the depth of that trust in action. I mean, in the wild, turning your back on something is a fatal mistake. But when your cat does it to you, it is the highest compliment they could possibly pay. It means they believe on a deep, primal level that you've got their back. It is a complete surrender of control, placed entirely in your hands.
Which kind of brings us right back to where we started. We live in a world that often feels chaotic and way out of our hands. We can try to control every last variable, like a base jumper, or we can lash out when we feel powerless. But maybe the real answer lies in what our cats seem to know all along, that the ultimate act of strength isn't always about seizing control, but about finding the people and the places that make us feel safe enough to finally, truly let it go.